Terrence Leahy here with another edition of the Intellectual Agrarian Podcast. Today's guest is Kevin Ellis, a poultry specialist from ATTRA and a good friend. Together, we'll talk about how he started in agriculture, discuss sustainable poultry production, and talk about why chickens need methionine in their diets. So join us, listen, and learn as we talk philosophy from the farm. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So before we get too far along, can you give us a brief biographical sketch? What was it that brought you to agriculture?
Sure. So I'm from a small town about 45 miles south of Dallas, and I grew up in North Texas, kind of in a smaller rural area. And my dad's a veterinarian, so I was kind of around cattle and horses and everything around then. We started doing poultry at one point. I was interested in, I did junior FFA, and kind of that built up. And then when I got into high school, I did regular FFA, and we started raising chickens, and it started out as a small kind of backyard flock and kind of grew and grew and grew. And then we started kind of doing pastured eggs and selling to a small farm stand down the street from us. And in high school, I did a lot of activities through FFA, poultry judging, parliamentary procedure, things like that. And that kind of just led me on to college. I went to study poultry science at Texas A&M, and then got a job with ATTRA after I graduated.
Wow. So before I butcher an explanation, can you tell us what ATTRA and NCAT are?
Right. So the organization, these can kind of get mixed up. It's, a lot of letters, but the organization is the national. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. The organization is the National Center for Appropriate Technology. We've been around for about 40 years now. We work on a lot of sustainable agriculture projects and programs, kind of doing helping with research and kind of extension for sustainable or organic agriculture efforts. And our big program is ATTRA, which stands for the Appropriate Technology Transfer for Rural Areas. And basically what we are is we used to kind of call it the National Sustainable Agriculture Information Service. So basically what we do is we write publications, we do presentations at conferences, we put on workshops, kind of teaching people how to do things like pasture management for poultry, or cover cropping, things like that. So a little bit of everything. We have agronomists on staff. We have people that do business development. So we will give free advice to anybody that calls in. We have a 1-800 number. If they have a question or if they want us to take a look at their business plan, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Wow. And you guys have been certainly helpful. I know in my experience, I've had a lot of questions over the years about this or that, and you guys have a great amount of publications on just answering questions that people may not know. Yeah.
I mean, basically we're just here to help in any way we can. And, we have a lot of people on staff that have been farming for decades now, and they kind of know, a lot of practical tips that you may just not have thought of. And that's kind of the way I see is, there are kind of hurdles everyone faces, getting started in farming. And sometimes, it's simple things that can trip you up. So we try to help, make those things a little bit clearer and get people past that.
Mm-hmm. So what is it you do there?
So I'm an ag specialist with a specialty in poultry. If you hadn't guessed already from kind of my background, that's in my wheelhouse. So I basically answer any questions that pertain to poultry. I've also helped with a few projects. I used to work out of our Iowa office in Des Moines, and we had a project helping a pastured poultry cooperative starting up in the western part of the state, to help kind of get into some of the larger regional markets like Omaha and Des Moines, and help them establish processing facilities. So we help out on things like that. But most of the day, I'm answering questions for people, or I'm writing and editing our publications and things like that.
Wow. So speaking of papers, you've updated a paper on methionine in poultry production, and even gave a presentation on that at the Moses conference before. Without diving in too deep, what is the importance of methionine in the diet of a chicken?
So Chickens are naturally omnivores. There's kind of a big movement, with the vegetarian fed, but chickens are naturally omnivores, and so they need protein and going a little bit deeper, amino acids, and for basically body maintenance and growth. And the biggest kind of limiting amino acid, the one that really they have to hit that requirement in order to grow, is methionine. It's an amino acid, and it can be found in a few different sources, and a lot of times it's in either like a muscle fiber or something like that. So it's usually not plant-based in diets. A lot of diets use fish meal to help cope with this, or to help supply it. The big issue for organic poultry production is that methionine in conventional poultry is usually supplemented through a synthetic compound, and so there are limits on what you can feed to chickens and turkeys in organic production with that synthetic methionine, and you may not be able to hit the recommended levels even with the
additional synthetic,
with that restriction. Yeah, exactly.
And that's like 2 pounds, 3 pounds, somewhere around there per ton of feed.
It's 2 pounds. Yeah, it's 2 pounds for chickens, that's laying hens and broilers, and then 3 pounds for turkeys or other poultry.
Okay,
is the restriction on, and that's pounds per ton. And that's the restriction for the synthetic methionine. But so people are trying to find other ways to supplement and feed. Fish meal, like I said, is commonly used, but there's some questions about the sustainability of acquiring that fish meal. And sometimes in egg production, it can leave kind of an off taste in the eggs. So there's a lot of people are looking at different ways to kind of supplement that, and there's some encouraging options. But people are, still kind of looking for that big solution, as it were.
So what are a couple of those other things that people can find methionine in, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Like I said, it's still kind of hard to find. The big one, if you're doing pasture access or pasture poultry, is basically insects.
Oh.
When they're out there foraging, they can get a lot of their protein needs and in turn that methionine need through insects. And so like your grasshoppers or your crickets or something like that, they'll be able to get it no problem. I have a friend, she's been doing pasture poultry on a very large scale for a long time now, and she said really. Her rough estimate was, one cricket can supply the daily protein methionine needs for one chicken for a day. Wow. Basically, a chicken eats the cricket and then they're good. So
wow.
That's kind of yeah. So that's kind of the main thing. As far as some of the feed stuff that are kind of being looked at, wholeless oats have kind of been looked at in that regard. There was a really interesting study from Ohio State University where they were basically growing, like they were rotating the broilers through pasture, and then they planted in, they call them naked oats. They're just oats without hulls. And then behind that rotation, and then would harvest oats and then feed them to the poultry the next kind of cycle that they were doing. So, and apparently that was working out pretty well. I think they put kind of some extras in there, maybe a little bit of soy and a nutrient balancer, but that was working out pretty well. And then, there's some other options. Some of them kind of have drawbacks as far as, they may not be as palatable for poultry. Field peas get brought up a lot, but there are some digestion issues there with poultry. And I think flax is used sometimes as well. So a little bit of everything. Like I said, people are still kind of looking for that silver bullet to kind of solve the problem in poultry production. But if you really kind of do a little bit of balancing, I think you can make it work.
Wow, it's fascinating. A lot of people don't think that there's this much that goes into what chickens get fed.
Right.
We look at our diet and we're like, we have X amount of calories here. We have to have this much protein. Take our 3 supplements a day and we'll be fantastic. But we forget that animals have dietary requirements too.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And, there's a lot of research that's gone into over the years because, you could even with poultry, there's a certain point where if you feed them too much of something, they kind of stop laying eggs, or they'll stop producing, or they'll stop growing for meat. So it's a lot like just kind of spinning plates. But it's kind of finding a happy medium for everything and making it all work. But it is kind of fascinating how it all works.
I remember one time the farm I had worked for at the time, they chose to change the feed because they want to try going something a little bit cheaper. And chickens, they're darn finicky things. They changed the feed, and literally within a day of that new feed, they stopped laying eggs. It was like they went on strike because they didn't like the cheaper feed. Apparently, they were snobbish. But you know what? The chickens, we gave them the old feed, and they were happy again. Of course, it took another week to get them to lay.
To get back to it. Yeah. I mean, chickens are creatures of habit. And I mean, you see it like any sudden change, whether it be to their housing or like you said, with feed, I mean, sometimes that really kind of throws them for a loop. They're you kind of see it if you have free ranging chickens and they come in, like clockwork at dusk every night. They like having they like when things are the same and kind of stable.
So yes, I am a chicken in many ways.
So, yeah, same here.
I'm curious. So how does this affect like the methionine and stuff? How does this affect the eggs or meat a person would buy in a grocery store? Because obviously, usually in the grocery store, they're not getting so if I'm understanding this right, on a pasture, they tend to have an easier access to methionine. Whereas if they're raised in a little more of a conventional setting, they don't get it as easily.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, and that depends if it's being supplemented in the feed. And it also, it's kind of variable depending on the pasture conditions, if there's a high population of insects, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But as far as it affecting kind of the bottom line product you could buy at the store, in a lot of ways, or a lot of farms have kind of taken this account, or they buy from a feed mill that's really done a lot of work trying to balance this out. But it really, I don't think there's any tangible effects on like the meat itself. It's just really a matter of the birds themselves growing. I mean, so in turn, you might get less of it. It might be a smaller bird that you buy from the store, or the chickens themselves might be laying less eggs. But it really can limit the growth of, the chickens you're producing or buying at the store. Say you're wanting, a 3.5-4 pound bird, if it has kind of limits on their methionine, they're going to get nowhere close to that big, probably more around like a 2.5 pound carcass at the store. So it can severely limit how much they grow. But as far as, nutritional quality or anything like that, there isn't much of a change.
Okay. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that fish meal makes fish meal's used kind of to help with that methionine. It gives the egg a slightly fishy taste, something like that. There's a feed mill that I've worked with, and they used fish meal for a very specific ration diet, and they actually marketed the eggs with that particular taste to it to, I'd like to say it was Japanese communities, because they're a little bit more, I don't want to say fishy, but they kind of like that. Apparently there is actually a market for that fish meal filled egg. I don't know. It's interesting. Again, whatever the market wants, someone's going to make it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the case for a lot of pastured laying hens is sometimes, here in Texas, I knew a farm, they had like a lot of wild onions that the chickens would always eat. And they said and I never really tasted it, quite honestly, but they'd kind of use that to their advantage in their marketing and just say, it's fresh, Texas wild onions, you can taste it, the pasture and the egg, essentially, is what they were going for. And that's another thing is a lot of people feed, table scraps or, their seconds, produce to their chickens. And that's great. But you might want to just, keep an eye on the strong taste kind of carrying over into the eggs. So things that are like heavily spiced or have just kind of a very strong taste in some cases can carry over into the eggs. And you see that with fish meal and, like I said, with onions. And I think flax will even do that if you feed too much of it.
Wow. Again, it's amazing how much can go into a chicken. So
Right.
This whole methionine thing, why is it more of a significant issue today than it was, say, 100 years ago or so?
I would say it's a bigger issue now, again, because of the limits in the organic standards, and how people kind of have to find a different way to supplement it. But again, I think it's more of an issue now because of the way chickens in that are usually grown. Back before World War II is when a lot of poultry was raised outdoors. It was less of kind of building based, which you may have some outdoor access in some buildings, but a lot of poultry had that access to pasture, so they were eating bugs and insects and all kinds of things. So it really wasn't as big a problem. They were getting that supplement in with a ration of just kind of a simple corn or soy ration. So I think it became more of an issue when you were trying to develop, the only thing they would be eating was the feed you gave them indoors. And that's when kind of the methionine issue became a little bit more clear. And like I said, it's especially significant more in organic poultry because you have to find kind of an alternate way for them to meet that entire dietary need.
So why are there these limits in organics?
Well, in organics, they wanted limit as many synthetic materials as they can. A lot of the synthetic methionine is a byproduct of it's like a petroleum byproduct. So I think they do that. I think there is some new methods that they're trying some like fermentation to try and get it. But I think for right now, a lot of it is more of a byproduct of kind of oil and gas refining, or it has been in the past. The organic standards, they try to get away from that as much as possible and, return to original or more environmentally sustainable practices. And I think kind of the idea there is they want the birds to be able to hit that need, but they also kind of want, to dangle the carrot to have people raise them with more access to the outdoors. And I think that's kind of part of it.
And
it's not.
Okay. Sorry, I was going to say, as we can see with the updated poultry standards and organics, they're being a little bit more specific on, okay, so you have to give the chickens at least X amount of space outdoors.
Right, exactly. Rather than just kind of, where they can go, stand on a porch and look at the pasture. They're trying to push people more in the direction where they can, get them outside where they're going to go and roam around and range and forage and what have you. So I think that's kind of the idea behind it was, helping them where they can hit that need, if only just barely with the amount that's allowed. But also trying to get people to do more in that direction.
So kind of just subtly encouraging them that if you can do better if you give them outdoors. Right. You will make it, but you can do better if you do more. I mean, it really is fascinating. It's allowing chickens to express their chickenness, really.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that's the way they're designed. As you said, they're omnivores.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're like modern-day dinosaurs.
Can't watch Jurassic Park without thinking of chickens.
Exactly, yeah. When I was a kid, talking about the background in agriculture, I always wanted to be, a paleontologist or work with dinosaurs, and I was going to joke I'm just working with the modern-day ones now. So kind of came full circle on that.
Oh, my. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you, Kevin. Thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything you would like to plug or share with the audience?
Sure. If you want to get in touch with ATTRA, we have over 400 publications. Most of them are free. Some of them cost a few dollars to download or to have sent to you, kind of shipping and printing costs. But you can go to our website. It's attra.ncat.org. And then we have kind of our hallmark has been we have a 1-800 number where anybody can call in during normal working hours during the week, 8 to 5, and ask a question. We'll either try and answer it there on the spot or give it to one of our other staff members around the country. And that number is 800-346-9140. Feel free to give us a call anytime and we'll be happy to help you out.
Now, this may seem like a stupid question, but hey, that's what we do on the show. So if a person is not a farmer Is it still okay if they call and ask a question?
Oh, absolutely. We have people just curious about things that call in to ask about it, or they're curious about farming in the future, or even just buying products from farms that are a little bit more sustainable and would like to learn more about the practices being used, which I think is fantastic. So anybody that just wants to know anything about farming, we're always happy to just sit down and chat a little bit and try and answer some questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for being on the show. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much. I hope you'll be on the show again sometime.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, feel free to give me a call whenever.
It was great to talk chicken scratch with Kevin. You can find the links to what we talked about in the descriptions below, along with the information for ATTRA if you're ever curious to learn more about sustainable agricultural productions. You can help out our show by subscribing on whatever listening medium you're using and leave behind a nice review. Once again, I'm Terrence Lehue. This has been the Intellectual Agrarian Podcast, reminding you to keep farming the dream.